"He's a system kid playing professional," the attorney said, loud enough for the gallery to hear, and the room went still around the words. The bailiff felt it land. He was new to Family Court Annex, 8 weeks on the rotation, still learning which creaks in the floor carried, which judges wanted the side door held and which preferred to push through it themselves. That morning he'd watched the young man in the gray suit come through security with nothing but a slim leather folder and a visitor badge that said advocate in small block letters, and he'd thought, without meaning to, too young for this room. The advocates he'd seen before were older, gray at the edges, the kind of tired that came from decades of other people's worst days. This one moved like someone who'd slept fine the night before. The bailiff had clocked him, filed the thought away, and gone back to his post, not unkind, just certain, the way a man is certain about a thing he's never bothered to check. Now, 20 minutes into a custody modification hearing that had started ordinary enough, he was watching that certainty get handed back to him with someone else's name on it. The young man, Desmond Rule, 31, though he looked younger when he wasn't speaking, did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the bench, hands folded on the table, and let the words finish landing before he spoke. "If counsel has a question about my qualifications," he said, "the court has the answer already on file." "Your qualifications," the attorney repeated, savoring it. He was a tall man named Pruitt, silver at the temples, the kind of voice that filled rooms because it had never once doubted it belonged in them. He'd built his whole career, the bailiff would learn later, on exactly this, finding the soft place in a witness and pressing until the room flinched with them. He had the case file open in front of him, not Desmond's advocacy file, but something else, something thicker, something he should not have had open at all. He let his fingers rest on it a beat longer than necessary, like a man enjoying the weight of a hand he hadn't yet shown. "Your Honor, before this court weighs a single word of recommendation from this witness, I'd ask it to consider where that recommendation is coming from." He flipped a page, unhurried, performing the unhurriedness as much as the reading. "I've reviewed Mr. Rule's own background. 11 placements. 3 group homes. Aged out of the system at 18 with no diploma in hand. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because this man is now telling a judge how to raise somebody else's child, and I move to strike his testimony as fundamentally unqualified to render it." A woman in the second row, the mother in the case, thin-shouldered, gripping her own folder like a lifeline, made a small sound and pressed her hand to her mouth. The bailiff's stomach turned. 2 months wasn't nothing, but he had never seen an attorney open what looked like a sealed juvenile file in open court and read it out like a hand of cards. Desmond still hadn't moved. "Your Honor," he said, "that file is sealed. I'd ask how counsel came to have it." "It came to me through proper discovery channels," Pruitt said smoothly, already pivoting, already reading the room's discomfort and deciding to ride past it. "And frankly, Your Honor, it's relevant. This is a man advising the court on a mother's fitness, a home's stability, a child's best interest, and he spent his own childhood being shuffled through 11 addresses. I'm not attacking him personally. I'm asking whether someone who never had a stable home himself is in any position to tell this court what one looks like." Judge Adaora Mensah did not raise her voice. She rarely did, the bailiff had learned that much in 2 months. She simply set down her pen, which everyone in the room had learned meant something was about to change. "Mr. Pruitt," she said. "Where did you obtain Mr. Rule's juvenile case file?" "Discovery request to the county, Your Honor, filed 3 weeks. That file is sealed by statute. It does not appear on any standard discovery list, and it would not be released without a specific court order, which this court did not issue. I'll ask you again, and I'd advise you to answer carefully this time." For the first time, Pruitt's voice lost a degree of its polish. "Your Honor, I obtained it through an investigator my client retained. I believed it to be relevant impeachment material." "You believed a sealed juvenile record was fair game in open court," the judge said, "because the person it belongs to is sitting at the table instead of standing behind it." She let that sit. "Mr. Rule, would you like to respond, or would you like the court to handle this from here?" "I'd like to respond, Your Honor." Briefly. Desmond finally turned, and the bailiff saw his face for the first time straight on, not angry, not wounded, just very still, the way a man looks when he has had a long time to decide how he will carry something so it doesn't carry him. "Everything counsel read is true. I was in 11 placements. I aged out without a diploma. I got it at 22, at night, working 2 jobs, because nobody told me I couldn't. None of that disqualifies me from this work, Your Honor. It's the reason I do it. The mother in the second row had stopped crying and was watching him now, hard, like she was trying to memorize something she'd need later. What counsel left out, Desmond went on, his voice even, unhurried, because he didn't read that far, or because it didn't suit him, is that the court already has a complete record of my professional standing. It was filed with this court 11 months ago, when I was assigned to this case. I'd ask that the court read it, rather than take my word, since apparently my word is now in question. Judge Mensah turned to her clerk. Ms. Okonkwo, pull the supervisory commendation file on Advocate Rule. Court reference, CASA Personnel Division. The bailiff watched the clerk rise and disappear into the side chamber, and watched Pruitt's confidence do something subtle and terrible, not collapse, not yet, but flicker, the way a man's face flickers when he realizes he has read half a story aloud and is about to be handed the other half in front of everyone he was trying to impress. It took 4 minutes. The room did not speak. Somewhere behind him the bailiff heard the building's old radiator tick, the only sound besides breathing, and he found himself standing straighter than he had all rotation, the way you do when you sense, without yet knowing why, that you are about to be wrong about something you were sure of an hour ago. He thought of the visitor badge again, Advocate, small block letters, and felt, for the first time, a little ashamed of how fast he'd read it and moved on. The clerk returned with a folder, sealed, gold edge, the kind reserved for personnel files the court itself maintained. She handed it to the judge. Judge Mensah read it first in silence, her face giving away nothing, which the bailiff had also learned in 2 months was its own kind of warning. She turned one page, then another, slower than the moment seemed to want, and the bailiff understood she was making sure of every word before she let it leave her mouth. Then she looked up, and looked, deliberately, not at Desmond but at Pruitt. For the record, she said, I'm going to read this aloud, in full, so that no one in this courtroom is in any doubt about who is sitting at that table. She adjusted her glasses. Desmond Rule. Certified court-appointed special advocate, Hargrove County, 8 years standing. Promoted to senior advocate 4 years ago. Promoted to advocate supervisor 2 years ago, the youngest in this county's recorded history to hold that role. She paused there, letting it sit, then went on. In that time, Mr. Rule has been the assigned advocate of record, supervising or direct, for 61 children moving through this court's dependency and custody dockets. 61. 0 formal complaints filed against him by any judge, guardian, or family in 8 years. 3 written commendations from this bench specifically, 1 from me, 2 from my predecessor, 4, and I'm quoting, advocacy that consistently centers the child's actual voice over institutional convenience. She closed the file and set it down flat on the bench, as if she meant for the sound of it to be heard too. Mr. Pruitt. You stood in my courtroom this morning and told me this man was unqualified to judge what a stable home looks like. He has spent 8 years building 61 of them, one case at a time, in this building, while you were building your reputation in others. Nobody in the gallery moved. The mother in the second row had her hand pressed flat against her chest. Pruitt opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out of it. I'm not done, the judge said. You obtained and read aloud, in open court, a sealed juvenile record belonging to an officer of this court, without authorization, for the express purpose of attacking his credibility before this bench. That is not impeachment. That is a violation of state confidentiality statute, and depending on how your investigator obtained it, possibly several others. Your motion to strike is denied. I'm entering a formal reprimand against you, on the record, effective today. And I am referring this matter to the State Bar's Professional Conduct Board for review of how that file was obtained and why you believed reading a sealed juvenile record aloud, unprompted, to embarrass a court-appointed advocate, was an acceptable litigation strategy in my courtroom. Your Honor, We're in recess for 10 minutes, the judge said. When we resume, Mr. Pruitt, you'll proceed on the merits of your client's case, which I notice you have not actually addressed yet. She rose. The bailiff moved automatically to hold the side door, the motion so practiced he barely registered doing it, his eyes still on the table where Desmond Rule sat closing his folder with the same unhurried calm he'd had since the words first landed against him. Pruitt was gathering his papers too fast, the silver-edged confidence gone slack, a man recalculating in real time how the next 10 minutes of his career might go. The mother crossed the room before anyone could stop her, not toward her own attorney, but toward Desmond. "Thank you," she said, low, urgent, her hand briefly on his sleeve. "Whatever happens with my case. Thank you for not flinching back there." "You don't need to thank me," Desmond said. "Your case is going to be decided on what's actually true, same as it would have been either way. That's all I ever wanted for it." She nodded, swallowed something, and went back to her own table, steadier than she'd come in. He stood, gathered his folder, and for a moment his eyes passed across the gallery, across the bailiff, who had not said a word the entire hearing and had no official business being noticed at all. But something in Desmond's face acknowledged him anyway, a small, even nod, as if he'd clocked exactly what the bailiff had been thinking that morning at security and held no grudge for it. As if it happened often enough that he'd stopped letting it cost him anything. The bailiff found his voice before he'd planned to use it. 61 kids, he said quietly, falling into step beside him toward the hallway. In 8 years. 62, technically, Desmond said. Case before this one closed Friday. Good outcome, kids staying with his grandmother, which is what he wanted from the start. He almost smiled, the first real give in his expression all morning. I don't keep count for the number. I keep it because every one of those 62 had a file somewhere with 11 addresses in it too, or 12, or 6, and somebody needed to be the person who read the whole thing before deciding what it meant. That attorney didn't read the whole thing. No, Desmond agreed. He read the part he thought would scare me into the hallway. Most people stop at the addresses. They never get to the part where I went back. He walked out past the gallery, unhurried, the same way he'd walked in, past the rows of people waiting their turn at whatever this building owed or denied them, and the bailiff realized, watching him go, that the file Pruitt had tried to use as a weapon was the only part of Desmond's story anyone in that room had been handed all morning, right up until someone finally asked for the rest of it, and it had taken the truth exactly 4 minutes to set the whole record straight once asked. When the bailiff filed his shift notes that night, he wrote down the case number, the time, the ruling, and then, underneath, a line that wasn't required of him and that he wrote anyway, because 2 months in he was already starting to understand what this building was actually for. Asterisk watched a man get judged twice today. The second time, by the truth. The first time doesn't count anymore, asterisk.